Overtime was created by Matt Holman, founder of the EMW Foundation, and is made possible by the Prodigy Media Group and RPM Athlete Performance, with inspirational credit to my friend, Dr. Fred Obi. Welcome to Overtime, an open conversation series on racism in the sport of lacrosse. We hope you find this thought-provoking, educational, and it leaves you better prepared as a member of the lacrosse community. Thanks again for joining us, and now for this week's panel. Welcome to tonight's show. My name is Matt Holman, the host, and tonight we have an all-women's panel featuring players and coaches from a variety of levels. So this is episode 2 of Overtime. Let's meet tonight's panel. I'll start with Diana Oduho. Diana began playing her freshman year at Villa Maria Academy High School in Erie, Pennsylvania, a high school where Black students made up of 10% or less of the student body. She attended and graduated in 2018 from Tiffin University in Tiffin, Ohio, where she played NCAA Division II lacrosse, earning first team all-conference honors and leading her team as a 2-year captain. She majored in communications, concentrating on public relations, then went on to earn her MBA in marketing the following year. So hi, Diana.
Hello. Hi, guys.
Next is Daniela Eppler. Daniela began playing at the age of 5 or 6, where she was introduced to the game by her dad, who played at the University of Virginia. She attended the predominantly white Roland Park Country private school in Baltimore County. Daniela graduated from the University of Virginia in 2015 with a Bachelor of Arts in Foreign Affairs and earned her 2016 Master's in Public Policy. She previously served on the coaching staffs at Urban Meyer School, Skywalkers Lacrosse Club, and in Baltimore, and the University of Pittsburgh. She's a current member of the WPLL and a player and assistant coach for the Mexican women's national team. So hi, Daniela.
Hi, everyone.
Next is Jesscia Barden. Jesscia picked up the sport at Sweetbriar College in Lynchburg, Virginia, after her coach handed her a stick and told her she thought she'd like the sport. She was an on-the-spot true basketball convert. She graduated in 2000 with a degree in psychology. And I'll say her impact in Arizona lacrosse for girls is nothing short of epic, I would say. In addition to serving on the USL Board of Directors, Jesscia has founded or co-founded Desert Heat Lacrosse, which is a girls' travel team, Desert Sticks Lacrosse, which is a K-8 youth program, the Arizona Storm Post-Collegiate Lacrosse Club, and along with another Arizona legend, Tina Murphy, they created the Pink Empowered Foundation that helps players who otherwise are not able to afford the sport. On top of that, she's a longtime head coach at Chaparral High School. So hi, Jesscia.
Guys.
Next is Davia Malcolm. She was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan, a diverse community known as the Bubble. We're going to have her explain that in a second. Introduced to the game her freshman year at Skyline High School, which was a brand new school at the time. She played in Ann Arbor on the Ann Arbor travel team throughout her high school years and was a proud member of Skyline High School's first ever graduating class of students. She's given back to her alma mater as a JV and varsity assistant coach, and she's currently the head coach of the crosstown rival Huron High School, where she continues pursuing her college degree. Next is Gina Thomas. Hi, Gina. She began playing at Pottstown Middle School in Pennsylvania, an ethnically diverse community, a 2005 graduate of The Ohio State University with a degree in early childhood. Yeah, I know. She is a 2-time U.S. team member and received the 2009 All-World Team Honors. Gina is head coach at the University of Cincinnati. So welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Next is Dana Dobbie. Dana, I want to thank for helping me to gather a number of you, and she's provided a number of referrals that will get us going for the next couple of episodes of all different types from the women's game and even some of the men's games. So I appreciate that, Dana. But she grew up in Fergus, did I say it right? Ontario, Canada.
Yeah, you nailed
Which is an all-white community. She is a 2008 graduate of the University of Maryland, where she majored in family science. Dana has received multiple accolades as a player in college and internationally. She's currently an assistant coach at Loyola University of Maryland, a member of Team Brave of the WPLL, a member of Team Canada, and she serves as the vice chair of lacrosse athletes for World Lacrosse, and that's where we got to meet and laugh a lot. And last but not least is Kayla Treanor. He was born and raised in Niskayuna.
Niskayuna.
I knew it. I should know.
It's hard.
I should know this. Kayla began playing at a very early age, led to a heralded career at Syracuse University, go Orange. She won numerous awards there, and my type unfortunately cut out, but I know she won some cool player awards while she was at Syracuse, and I'm trying to think of the ones that I was just thinking of. But she is a current member of the WPLL flight and current assistant coach at Boston College. There they are. She was a first-team All-American 4 straight years at Syracuse. And what I think is really cool, she was the Q's Award for Female Performance of the Year in Syracuse Athletics. So that's a pretty cool honor at a major university. And I almost said last but not least, but now Sydney has joined us, got her computer issues out of the way, which is great. Hi, Sid.
Hi.
Sydney is a Salisbury, Maryland born and raised. She started playing for the Scoopers, the U5 team, which is cool. She's a 2016 graduate of San Diego State University, where she majored in political economy and public policy, and currently wears multiple hats in the San Diego lacrosse community, where she serves as the San Diego High School varsity head coach. She's program director and head coach for the Lady Warriors of East County, San Diego, and also co-program director of Aces Lacrosse Club, which is more like a travel team. Sydney has also worked for my EMW Foundation events since her college days, and that is much appreciated. So, ladies, welcome, welcome, welcome. And we are going to get started. You submitted some really, really cool questions, and I just want to get right to those because there's a lot to unpack in this, hopefully, hour or so conversation. I'm going to start with one, though, from the men's panel. That was the last episode. And it's an interesting question. It's, does racism in women's lacrosse pertain to position, skill or athleticism, offense versus defense, the same way it has been seen in the men's game? And anybody wants to take that question, because it is a very general question.
I actually was thinking about this earlier. I don't know if it's a direct translation from men's to women, but something that I've seen in my other friends who are also Black that have played lacrosse has seen is majority of Black people who do, which is a very small number that play lacrosse, end up on the defensive side. And it's, yeah, and it's very interesting to see how that is. I played midfield in high school, and that was the first time I ever picked up a stick. But then when I went to college and played, I transitioned to defense, and everyone that I saw who looked like me, right, played defense. And so I think there's definitely a theme there. Why isn't any players attack or midfield? But that is something I definitely see a lot.
Yeah, I think it's exposure. I think, you know, the at the point where most African American players are introduced to the sport, it's either later in middle school or in high school where, you know, our counterparts are introduced at an earlier age. So the stick skills, I think, may differ at times, and just the elevation of the game. I think, you know, not good, bad, or indifferent. I just think it's an easier thing to teach, if you will. and grasp when it comes to playing the game once you're kind of exposed to it a little later.
I agree. I played defense. Well, I played every position but goalie. My coach put me in defense. I had one coach my freshman year, and she just kind of didn't teach us anything. She was just kind of there. And then my coach that came in the second year, he really put everyone in their positions, and I was more defensive. I don't mind it, you know, as a Black woman, that's what we're taught to do, is defend our home and you know, like, defend what's ours. So I don't really mind it, but I do see mostly Black women on the defensive end as well. Until I started coaching this year, and my captain, I had an inherited captain from the last coach, and she was an attackman. So it was the first time I'd ever seen a Black attackman.
Wow.
That's interesting, because I've never even thought of that ever, you know, so that's crazy. Now I'm going to think about that a little bit more, you know. I definitely know as a coach that I would put somebody who is new, depending, in a defensive position just until they learn. But then as they get better at it, then, you know, they're moving to midfield, maybe even attack, you know. But that's overall for me in my mind just thinking about that. But yeah, now I'm going to be more cognizant about that.
Our assistant coach when I was coaching, also, he was a Black male. The second year, once we got, so we had sophomores and freshmen, two of the players on our team, they were mixed, and their dad was Black, and he came in and coached, and he was our defensive coach, and he was Black. So it's just like, I guess a defensive mindset is where we kind of had to.
Interesting. Now this is, I'm going to set this one up a little bit. And this is one of our panelists tonight set with this in, and I thought it was good. Most of the issues surrounding race in the U.S. are deeply ingrained in all aspects of our lives. Systemic racism is at the intersection of issues plaguing our education system, our healthcare, law enforcement, etc. Sports are an incredible platform for educating young kids, and also provide a platform for athletes to reach large audiences. What are we willing to do as a lacrosse community to contribute to the true changes that need to occur in our society? How can we use lacrosse as tools to dismantle some of the systems that have been built to oppress others? That's a deep one, but that's the point of this conversation. Kayla, I feel like you're going to say something.
Yeah. So this definitely is not answering the question, but I've found that just starting to have these conversations with my team at Boston College and just college teammates and other coaches and stuff like that. It's interesting. We asked our team at BC, we asked two questions, and, you know, with his team Zoom, and it took a long time. And the first question was, you know, what were your initial feelings or reactions to the death of George Floyd? And then, you know, that we talked about that for a long time. A lot of the players talked. And the second question we asked was, well, what can we do as an individual at Boston College as a lacrosse player? And that was a really difficult question for our team to answer. And I've kind of been astounded by how so many people in the lacrosse community have never even had these conversations before. It's really amazing how I had a teammate who called me the other day saying, I just need you to talk to me about this because I've never talked about this before. And so while that's not answering the question you asked, Matt, but what I found is that I do, and a lot of people are talking about it, but I do think that whole education piece is so important because we have a lot of people in the lacrosse community who have never, ever had these conversations before. So it doesn't answer the question on what we can do, but just throwing that out there, I think where we have to start is the education piece.
Yeah,
For sure.
100%.
Sorry, I 100% agree with that. And I think that the education has to start from a young age, because there's no such thing as too late. But when you're in your mid-20s and you say that you've never been exposed to issues of racism, or you've never been aware of those issues, it's almost like, how could you not have known that these were true issues that are occurring in society? And there's really no excuse to not be aware of those issues. Maybe you don't understand, or you can't comprehend the extent of those issues, maybe to a certain extent, or maybe you weren't exposed to the extent that right now everyone's being exposed on the media and all platforms. But to really not know that those issues are really occurring, I think the education needs to start much earlier. And I think sports provide an opportunity to do so from an early age, showing inclusion or pointing out issues of discrimination, maybe in a subtle way when kids are little, and teaching them from the start how to be an equal society.
Yeah.
I think we burned all the history books.
Yeah.
Right. To be honest, we're, at first we're taught that there's Democrat and Republican at a young age. And then you start going deeper into that. Okay, so what did the Democrats do before, and what did Republicans do before? And then, then at some point you learn that someone was racist, and then you learn more about the racism, and then you're either taught that it's wrong, or you're not taught that it's wrong, and then you get to make your own decisions. So like you said, starting from a young age, like, we need to have our teachers be more vocal about what they're teaching. Like, just because you want to be a teacher and you want to teach kids, you also need to know who you're educating and what you're educating them on.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think one way to teach is to have diversity, right? If you're at an all-white school with no people of color, it's really difficult to teach inclusion and to really make that part of the kids' everyday lives. And I think that's the problem with lacrosse right now, is that there isn't enough diversity that we can really teach those issues at a young age and teach that everyone is equal, because, like we're just talking about, people of color don't have the same opportunities to excel in the sport until a later age. So automatically that's setting a barrier between people of color and white people that are playing the game. And so if we start with that type of inclusion at a younger age, it's easier to teach, I think.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think it starts at home as well, right? So when you're young, a lot of the things that you keep with you is when you're at home. So if you don't learn that at home, you're going to grow up maybe living in a predominantly white area, or going to a predominantly white school, not interacting with Black people, not knowing their struggles or their cultural background. So then that creates a barrier in itself, to where you as a white person may go later on and play with a Black person. You don't know how to interact with them. You don't know what they've been through. You don't have that connection. So I think it starts with education. And Kayla, I've been seeing the posts that you've been making, and they're great. Like, it's literally exactly what people need to be seeing. A lot of people, like you said, a lot of white people, even my friends that I have played with, are like, I didn't realize there was so much. I'm like, yes, educate yourself, right? So it's not on us as Black people to educate you. We can be there, we can help you, and we can support you, but at the core of it, like, you have to want to learn to be better and learn to say, how can I call out my white friends? How can I talk about this with my family and friends? And on the field, I think it just has to do with inclusion, because there's so many times where I was lucky enough to have like Black teammates in college, but in high school, I was the only white person, or Black person, excuse me, in my, I know, right? In my team from high school. And so then it's like, who do I have to look to share this experience with, right? No one. And so it goes a long way with having white teammates who are like, okay, I'm understanding, like, I can never understand what you go through, but I'm trying to understand, and I'm trying to support you and advocate for you as well. So it definitely is huge there.
Yeah, and I think as a sport, we need to decrease the participation of the price to pay lacrosse. I know, for those of you who don't know me, I grew up in a really small town of Ontario, Canada, factory town, where lacrosse was one of the cheapest sports for me to play. We shared equipment, we shared sticks, and we started at such a young age. And as Matt said, I've grown up in a community, an all-white community, where it wasn't multicultural. And I think for us across the world, for lacrosse, is we have to decrease the price of our equipment, the price to participate. So from a young age, like we're talking about, people from all walks of life can step up, get a free stick, learn the sport, and then from the beginning of a lacrosse experience, you're surrounded by people of all different races, all different backgrounds, because the financial side of that isn't an issue to start that sport. And I look back at, and I look at all of my friendship circle, and my closest friends come from the lacrosse community because I'm lacrosse 24/7. And, you know, being that it's not a sport that's inclusive, my friend circle isn't very multicultural. And I look at that and I really reflect on that as a huge problem. And I can think of all of my Black teammates or my Black opponents, and I can name every single one of them. And that is a huge problem. And I look at the responsibility that we have at the professional level, the world level, and I think decreasing the cost to participate for me is number one we have to do, so we can allow more kids to pick it up and play.
Yeah, I think the fact that you have to pay $3,000 just to enter into a tournament is kind of crazy. You know, and it comes with all the bells and whistles, but not everybody needs the bells and whistles. You know, we just want to play, have fun. Let's keep the cost down. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, and not just the cost of starting to play, but also the cost of getting to the level where people of color can have those leaders to look up to in the sport. Because if they can play as a child, but then in order to play in college, like you're saying, you have to pay $3,000 every summer to get to that next level. Well, then there's never going to be any leadership that, or the amount of leadership that we want from you know, people of color represented in that leadership, to really have people of color look up to those players and have something to aspire to.
Interesting. I'm gonna just touch on something we picked up with the men's group. A few of you mentioned education, and what Scott Burnham had stated for education was that every youth league he played in the Syracuse, New York area as a Native American, they spent an equal amount of time on teaching the history of the game that they did with ground balls. And so all of you, and I think all coaches really, I know I grew up that way in New Jersey, we learned the history of the game first. And so me as a Black player, and there was 2 of us on our 8th grade team, I'm pretty much closer to the sport than all of you white guys. So you guys, you know, and now these are friends and teammates from my life, but I just thought it was funny. And that's how, for me, mentally, I internalized it. Like, hey, American Indians played this. My great-great-grandmother was an American Indian, Native American. So it was my sport. You know, it's not a, somebody said, it's not a lily white sport, even though lily white people think they own it. And you'll say, oh, it's Northeast prep school sport. You're like, no, it's Northeast. That's the only part that's right. And then the rest is wrong. So I will pose this next question. This came in from my friend Taylor Pinnell, who's the interim head coach at Columbia. She sent a number of good questions, but I thought this one was appropriate. How do you as coaches cultivate an environment that supports a diverse team? And I'm going to throw this to you, Gina, first, because you are one of our leading head coaches here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting for me as a player that played with Black players, and now there's a very slim amount of coaches at our level at Division I that are Black. You know, before I even answer the question, I think it's like, for me, I think it's like I think it's ignorance and a lack of empathy. I think it's, you know, not even just in the lacrosse world, but in our world in general. Like, we don't necessarily see someone else's problem as our problem. And I think that, you know, for me, this whole thing, you know, the anger of George Floyd, like I told my team, this is not about George Floyd. Like, this has happened so many other times. This just happened to be the one time that it caught fire for the world to see, and actually feel some empathy from people that are not Black. But this has happened so often, and even little things have happened for me where it becomes topic of conversation. And I talked about this with my Ohio State alum not too long ago, but every time something happens in the world of lacrosse and it's Black, like, I think I have to turn my phone on silent because I feel like everyone just is like, oh my gosh, how you doing? What do you feel? How do you do? I'm like, listen, like, if I actually told you how I felt, it probably would not be good. And one, and two, there'll probably be a lot more things that you need to censor. But I feel like big picture for us and my team, I feel like it's an immediate conversation for me because I am Black. For me, diversity is important. And I try, to be honest, I'm like kind of like I am on the fence of being prejudiced. When I see a Black girl, I'm like, she's on my list. I don't care if she's good, bad, or terrible. Like, so like for me, it's one of those things where I try to create that because that was me growing up. I played with white and Blacks. And then at college, I was fortunate enough to choose a school that had multiple Black players that played on it. And hence was one of the reasons why I chose that school. So I feel like for me, it's an immediate conversations with parents and kids because it's the obvious. Hey, you're coming to a program where your head coach is Black. So that also has to be, for me, we're a family of inclusion and we don't like let things kind of blow over. We talk about stuff where, you know, I talk about a story for me when myself and one of my teammates at Ohio State, Kimberly Lowe, now McCullough, we went to a school, unnamed school, and we're playing in the game, and we were in a double team. Official blows the whistle, and she was like, it was one of you Black girls. And I was like, my teammate goes, there's numbers. Like, was it 14 or was it, you know, number 10? And I'm like, literally, like, I feel like instances like that, I feel like our kids, like, I don't know, I think nowadays kids are dealing with a little bit more in your face racism and prejudice. So I think it's just something that what we try to do is talk about it up front with our kids. And like I said, for me, it's a little, I guess, easier because I am Black. So it's like, hey, you're coming to play for a Black coach. Just know that we work on inclusion. It's not easy. It's not a, you know, easy conversation, but it's not like I talk about it every day. But every situation that comes up in at least our lacrosse world, our team knows that I'm an advocate for like, this is not okay. And this is why. And for my team, it's more been like, they're just as frustrated as me because they're like, yeah, well, this has been happening. And even in the lacrosse world, for how long, how many people have tweeted out the N-word and not have had a consequence? How many teams have had an issue of painting their face Black and not had a consequence? Where for us, we're kind of, it's a little, I hate to say easier, but for us, it's more of a conversation of, all right, now what? What do we need to continue to do? But, you know, I also mentor some kids for the Harlem lacrosse team, and they're just like, every time we go to a club tournament, they're looking at us like we crazy. And I'm like, yes, I understand. But we as Black women have a responsibility to carry ourselves in a different light and not make it that way. Even though they're looking at you like you don't belong here, that's on them, that's not on us. And how do we continue to carry ourselves? And like Kayla said, it's education, but I also think you and Diana, it is at home. So the hard part is, how do we change people's home life? We don't. We can't raise everyone with an inclusive spirit. This is what you learn, and this is something that, again, maybe will catch fire for everyone to understand. It's not as easy as being Black and white. There's so much more to it. It's not as easy as saying George Floyd is the reason why we want have an inclusive world. It's like, I'm happy that this is happening, but there's so much more than just George Floyd. And that's for me, the concept that we're trying to get to our team and kind of how we can impact more than just our circle. Because I think that's important too. You have to impact, and kind of Dana said it, you have to look at yourself and look at your circle first. Mm-hmm. And it's those little things of I might not be racist, but yeah, I kind of have this prejudice. I think a prejudice of just by circumstance that I'm in this situation, or when I do walk down the street and I see someone Black, I do clutch my purse a little harder. That's not racism, it's prejudice, but that cultivates the system. So I'm blabbling, I apologize, but I just think it just becomes something that is an empathy thing. We have to not necessarily feel what other people are feeling, but understand that what is going on in our world is not the only thing going on in the world for us to help with this.
Well, and I'd also, if I can just add on to that, like when in talking to some of my players, they felt included on the team. There was inclusivity, but outside of the team, outside activities, that's where the disconnect was. Like they didn't feel as invited, or for whatever reason, they weren't participating in those things. So I think it's also important as a coach, making sure that people outside, the social settings of the field, they're also feeling included. I don't know how you do that except for just communication and talking and making sure that people aren't feeling left out.
Right, for sure. And I think, Gina, you're right. You can't change what people learn at their house. But I think, especially as a white coach, I think that people have the responsibility to take situations that occur and use that as learning opportunities for their team, regardless of whether there are people of color or any other type of minorities on their team. They should use those opportunities to teach. I know when I was at Virginia, I don't know if you guys are familiar with what the incident that happened to Martise Johnson, where he was accused of using a fake ID at one of our bars, and he was beaten by the police in front of everybody. And it was something that was talked about in our locker room amongst our teammates. And I remember being outraged at some of the comments like, oh, well, he probably was using a fake ID, like he definitely did something to deserve it. And those types of comments where even if he was using a fake ID, it doesn't matter. He shouldn't have been brutalized by the police, right, as a college student. And that opportunity would have been an opportunity to take that and teach the team about issues of racism, discrimination, or mistreatment of minorities, of Black people, of people of color, of gay, straight, whatever, but use that as an opportunity. And I think that we often let those opportunities go without, speaking about them. And I think we need to do better.
Absolutely.
Right. And Gina, you mentioned, you touched on it, that you have discussions with your team, and it's obviously, and you said it's a little more comfortable for you being a Black woman. However, that conversation doesn't have to be perfect. I think the whole point of us having this little Zoom chat, it's not going to be perfect. I've said that to you guys, off camera. I don't have the answers. I just know that within the sport I love, having this conversation it should help. It could be something somebody refers to. Sydney, you work with a high school here I'm familiar with in San Diego that has a diverse mix of girls from probably different economic backgrounds. And I know one of your questions was, what serving underprivileged kids, you're seeing that it's an eye-opening sport for them and that they fall in love with it. But, how do you maintain that? And just touch on the high school, the team makeup, if you would, of your program, Sid.
Yeah, so our high school is located right in downtown San Diego. So we have a lot of different neighborhoods that all go to the school. And it's interesting because our varsity team is a lot of white kids that live in more affluent neighborhoods around downtown. But the JV team, and I mean, even varsity, we have a lot of mixed girls, Hispanic girls, but JV is this amazing mix of kids that have never played before and are so excited. And I think touching on the defensive aspect is that I've noticed that a lot, that especially the Black girls and Hispanic girls are afraid of playing attack and playing midfield. They're oh no, my stick skills, I can't do it. And I'm everyone out here just started. If you want to score goals, then by all means, that's what you should be going and doing. Don't let anyone tell you you have to play a certain position just because you just started. But I think, especially for me, I grew up in a very small town, and all my teammates were always white and looked just like me until I went to college. So going and coaching a program like this, when I first started, my athletic director was we need to order sticks and we need to order goggles and we need to order gear for the team. And coming from where I grew up, I was what do you mean? We have everyone has their own stuff. And it was such a that sounds crazy to me now because I've coached them for such a long time, I feel but when I started, I was just like so mind blown by the lack of like resources and the lack of like even people caring to like help these girls. And I think it's just been like mind bending how hard it is for some of them to play and continue playing. And I even have one junior that's starting a program for our team for like kindergarten through 5th grade kids to like come to the high school and learn how to play, and we'll provide sticks and food from Feeding San Diego and like all this stuff that we're going to be doing. And I'm excited and like so grateful that she brought this to me and like wanted to include our team and like show that we, even just at San Diego High School, because I know a lot of teams in San Diego still look very like lily white, but like just trying to show that like as the oldest high school in San Diego, that we're trying to like move this game into the parts of our city that don't have a lot of exposure. But it is hard because we have no financial backing, no like support from the school. We're all self-funded. So it's really eye-opening to see.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
I've had actually a talk with my girls. Well, our season got cut short. So as Matt mentioned, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, Northwest PA. And so I started out in high school. I was lucky enough to I went to a predominantly white prep school. So my mom would bust her butt to, make sure I could get that kind of education. And so I could see the disparity. So I would go home, it's predominantly Black neighborhood. I'm trying to do wall ball. Everyone's like, what is that? Like, what are you even doing? What is that stick? Like, no one has any idea what I'm doing. So it's like that disparity between that, and then you go to school and you see everyone else who has their sticks paid for, parents pay for clubs and they don't have to worry about making a travel team. So it's hard, and I'm assuming, your girls feel that too. They're like, it's hard to get that funding, and especially if it's not school funded, it's so difficult. And what I told my girls here, I coach at Xavier Prep, which is, Jessica knows where that is. We've actually played against each other, but Xavier is a very affluent area. It's downtown Phoenix, facilities, stakes, whatever they need, the school provides. Like, we barely, as coaches, I never once this year we had to ask or try to come out of pocket. And so I was talking to them about drive once and just wanting to be better for yourself and stick skills and stuff. And so they have everything handed to them. And so they don't know, for people who may not, what it's like. And so I kind of shared my story with them. And what I told them is, when I wanted to work on my stick skills and me having to feel like I have to work twice as hard as the white person next to me on the field, like it's an eye-opener for them. They had no idea. And so I'm like, you guys have all of these facilities, all of these things that you can do to better yourself, and I would have to walk a block over just to get on the wall. And they're like, that's crazy. And I'm like, that's life. So it's an eye-opener. And for you to have players of a Hispanic or Black or non-white background, you kind of have to put yourselves in their shoes to really understand how to help them, really.
Yeah, I think, and like Dana said, I think, especially for club, because I co-direct the Aces Club in San Diego, we like price our seasons really low and like hopefully reasonable for a lot of people. But like specifically that one junior that wants to start the program at my high school, she came up with this whole program because or in the beginning of the email said, I can't afford to play on the club team this summer. I won't be able to do it, but instead I want to do this, 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 and this. And I responded and I was like, I'm not ever going to take, like, you tried out, you made the team. I'm not going to take that spot away from you because you can't like pay the full price or even any of it. Like, we'll find a way to get you on there because like you're a hardworking kid and you like put your heart and soul into this, and like not having those resources, like you work a full-time job, you go to high school full-time, you play 3 varsity sports, like you have so much going on in your life and you deserve that opportunity. So like we're gonna work to figure it out for you. And it sucks because I know that like you can't give that opportunity to every single kid that needs it.
Yeah. And the other part to that too is like you could potentially be saving lives, right? Like I had one dad in a conversation that I talked to, and he said, you don't understand what lacrosse meant for my family. Like that took my daughter, who was set to either possibly have a baby early, go into drugs, whatever. Like she could have easily gone that path because it's just around her more often. And he said to me, like, lacrosse saved my daughter's life, and it gave her the opportunity to go to college. And then she was the first Black player to play in that college. So she got to break down some boundaries there. And I mean, she made a great impact just by starting, and it was her junior year that she started, you know. And I think that's something also just to think about, like the playing lacrosse could really save lives here.
I mean, it's a really fun sport too. It's like, it's easy to learn. So if it was more accessible to everyone, then the sport would just flourish, I'm sure. You know, like football and basketball, they have pretty mixed diversity teams, and it can help people, but lacrosse just isn't, people don't know about it. Like I'll speak about my bubble. So in Ann Arbor, U of M is like right in the middle of our town. It's in the center of the town. And then we have 3 major high schools. I went to Skyline, and Skyline was built across from the richest neighborhood in all of Ann Arbor. And I don't know. There's a lot of people that live here. I don't know the number, but so Skyline, that had girls that knew about lacrosse. There was a young builder program that someone started, but it was, if you were white, you knew about it. If you weren't white, you didn't really know about it. My team, my coach was white, our defensive coach was Black, and then we had another assistant coach who's also a police officer now, and he was white. And then there was me, I was the oldest. Then there were 2 girls that were younger than me. They were twins, and they're mixed. We had an Egyptian, we had an Indian playing, we had an Asian playing. So Matt, I remember talking to you on the phone, and you were like, I'm surprised it was that diverse, but like where I'm from, it was a diverse team. So outside of Ann Arbor, we have little towns. There's Saline. Saline just made national news recently for racial comments coming from their football team. You know, hanging niggers and all that kind of stuff. And they were football players. And one of my close friends is actually a football coach at Saline, and he's Black. So, you know, them saying all those things, it's like, okay, well, you have a coach and a mentor that's there helping you every day, but when you go home, this is what you're saying. And so Ann Arbor in itself is diverse, but as soon as you step outside of Ann Arbor, you don't know what you're walking into. The first time I was called a nigger was in a lacrosse game with some of my other teammates in Tecumseh, which is like a very well-known, less diverse city it's like an hour away from us in the middle of the game. So my thing is, that was 10 years ago. I was like 15 or 16, but 10 years later, here I am as a coach, and I see that I'm still involved, but where did that girl go that called me a nigger? You know, where is she? Is she coaching? Is she allowing other players to feel like, do you know, did her mindset change or did it not change? Are you still around? Is that going to happen again if, you know, I come in contact with maybe her team or a family member of hers, you know? So this year I would have, if our season didn't get cut short, I would have had to travel back to that same city that happened in as a head Black varsity coach. So now it's my responsibility to make sure my team is safe. But also, you know, for a white coach, it might just be like, hey, we're going to go play this team. But for me, it's, I have to go to this city where I know people are racist, play a game, possibly win it, you know, and then if we win, I have to prepare myself for what's coming next. If these people don't want me there, you know, so the bubble that I live in is Ann Arbor. I don't think that'll happen to me here because I've been here my whole life. But as soon as I step out of my city, it's fair game for anyone to say anything that, you know, for just for the color of my skin.
And when that happened to you on the field, did you tell your coach right away, or did everybody hear it?
Everyone heard it. My coach, he's I love him. He's my mentor now. I nanny his kids. Just the energy that he gave off he was all inclusive to everyone. He's just a really good coach. So he heard it. He pulled us off the field because I think he knew that I was ready to throw some blows, and we couldn't do that. We were winning like 20-5. You know, we were like blowing them out of the water. So the score of the game really didn't matter, but he heard it, and like we kept playing the game. Their coach didn't really say anything from what I remember. Like it just kind of happened, and then everything kept going like nothing was wrong. And then later, the athletic director sent an email. I don't remember what the email said. He sent it to our coach, like apologizing, but nothing, no consequences ever came of that girl.
I think that is kind of where I've been the last like 5 to 6 years. Is like there's been so many things that have happened that haven't had consequences, and it's like, oh, here's our apology. We didn't mean it. It's like, nah, you did. But it's okay that you did, because now we actually see who you are,
right?
And like be in the space that you're in and be comfortable with who you are and understand. Like for me, I'm like, it's again, this whole thing is like at the end of the day, like we need to make sure we understand who and what we're saying and make it meaningful, and not saying things or doing things just because there's racial tension in the world, because there always has been. And what is it that we need to continue to do to like expose whoever is that way? Like my thing is like, if you're that city that you like that happened to you, like and you may not be able to change that city, but at least we know like that city is that city. Like I just feel like there's so many people, like you said, when you step out of that city, you don't know what you're walking into. At the end of the day, for me, it's like who you are is who you are, and don't put yourself in this light like, oh, I want to be inclusive because now the world is telling me I should be inclusive. So let me ask all the questions I need to ask to figure out this inclusivity. Like, I feel like at the end of the day, how can we be more real about who we truly are and what we truly want? And then we can move from there, instead of it just being like, oh, like this is happening all over the world, even in other countries. How can I be inclusive with it, versus it being like, no, if you're not an inclusive person, you can stay in your non-inclusive space.
Right. And it's almost like, you know, riding this bus home after a game and my team is playing music and you know, they play their uncensored music. I'm the only Black person on the whole school bus, but you know, that word comes up and it's, have you been taught not to say it?
Yeah. Oh my
you
gosh.
know, like if are you not saying it because you know that I'm sitting here on this bus with you, or are you not saying it because you know that it is wrong and you don't say it? No, you know, no matter what. And as a Black coach and a team, well, we were on the bus one time and I remember listening to them sing music, and I like wanted to just turn around and just be like this. And I feel bad for myself for not speaking up then, because I know now that like we have to nip that in the butt right away. Like it's not okay.
Yeah, and that's huge. I actually have had that happen to where when I was in college, obviously the music is uncensored and you want to play it, that's fine, because that's music that I listen to as well. But every time I know in a lyric, if the N-word comes up, like me and my friend, we would always be like, we're going to look around to see if anyone's saying it. Like, it's literally like that. I'm like, is someone getting ready to say it? Like, are they going to sing it? Are they going to, and in their heads, they're like, oh, it's just a song. But like, it's not. Like, yes, I'm okay with it being said in the song and being mentioned in the song. And if you want to listen to it, that's 100% okay. But you saying it is an issue. So I had like an instance where one of my white teammates, we were in the car, just got out of practice, getting ready to go to the cafeteria or whatever for dinner. And it played and I heard her. And in my mind, I'm like, calm down before I say something. And so I immediately turned around and I literally just very calmly said, don't ever say that again. And so then it was just silent the rest of the ride. And afterwards came and apologized and stuff like that. But I'm like, Are you apologizing because you said it? Are you apologizing to actually get the ramifications of you saying it? Like, I can't tell. Are you being sincere? So nowadays, you do have to watch what you're saying. But when Black people aren't around, or if it's not being recorded, what are you saying? What are you doing that people don't know about? That's huge. And if your white counterparts are around, I think it's up to other white people to speak up. If you're in an all-white room and you hear people making racist comments, making biased comments, things like that, like, are you actually speaking up and calling out your friends? Or are you just thinking in your head, oh, this is wrong, but I don't want to say anything. I don't want to stir the pot, right? So I think now the time, we've passed that, right? We can't no longer be silent. And as a white person who wants to be an ally, one thing I've said to my friends and to my white lacrosse teammates, I told them, I was like, ally is a verb. You don't just get to be an ally because you're making a post or you reached out to me and said, hey, I know everything that's going on, like, has affected you. Are you, like, it's continuous. You have to continue to be an ally. And that comes with speaking up and having those hard conversations that I think a lot of my white friends weren't having before. They're like, oh, I have a Black, that's my one token Black friend, right? But I'm like, if you only have one Black friend in your circle or two Black friends, like, what is your real perspective of Black people? And Trevor Baptiste, who plays obviously Black professional lacrosse player, he spoke out with everything that's been going on, and I watched it. It was like a 7-minute video on his Instagram, and he said that he was like, if I am your only Black friend, like, what is your perspective? Like, not all Black people are the same, so it's just about broadening perspectives and just being sensitive, but being genuine, right? If you're gonna listen to music, obviously, are you gonna say the same things that you say around me to your all white friends? That's kind of how you have to think about it. Are you gonna let your other white friends say those things, or are you gonna speak up?
Yeah, and you I think two of you actually hit on my next my question that was submitted here is, what ways have your experiences in the sport shaped the way you approach race as a coach or a member of a greater lacrosse community right now? And she used the example of, I guess the Oregon football team hosted a player-only meeting. It was the entire staff, families, and everybody was given the ability to join the meeting with the team to discuss racism. So what, I know, Gina, you mentioned you have more discussions, and I think that could occur for anyone. Again, I think Trevor Tierney said it best at the last talk. He said, playing lacrosse, you don't just pick up a stick, or you don't just put the player in the game and they mess up and you don't ever, the guy never plays again. You tell them it takes practice to get this right. And it's just like with this conversation, it's going to take practice to get it right. If you need to, say you're a white coach and you're on an all-white team, is it bad to bring in a Black person or a person of color, it doesn't have to be a Black person, to talk about the experience and maybe help facilitate the conversation? I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, as an idea. I don't know, Gina, you seem like you do this as a great benefit, I think, to your players, that you're doing it every year.
I mean, I think that, and it's one of those things where I feel like it's a gift and a curse, right? Bringing in a Black player to be one of the only. It's not easy, and like I am very lucky that I was never, until the U.S. team, I was never the only. So I feel like it's important to, like, I've now given my biracial and Black players a microphone to say, like, this is your conversation with your team. Let's have at it. Let's talk about what it really means. And I think the perspective of a white player who has played with Black people is a good perspective too, because you may not have seen it, you maybe have heard it, and I think it's a lot of different perspectives can kind of come together. But I think to your question, I'm not sure that discussion after one discussion is necessary. I think it needs to be a vulnerable continuum of direct, like, you know, Daniela said, like, it's pulling things, watching movies, and like, you know, the when they see us. I know one of our the alumni at Ohio State says she's having her coach watch, you know, When They See Us. Like, that movie is in your face, start to finish, heart-wrenching. And like, I just think having experiences outside of yourself, whether you're a white person from an all-white school or even a Black coach, you know, like, I think the experiences that everyone has to see is important. You know, for me, it's interesting because I have a white teammate that I played basketball with in high school who is now a cop in Milwaukee. And she's like, Gina, like, I hate it out here. It's like, it's just not as diverse. And I don't know how to, you know, communicate to my other cop friends. And I'm like, listen, this is not a cop thing either. It's not just the cops. It's not just Georgia. It's not particularly one thing. It's just, how can we make sure we are more empathetic to education, like Dobbie said, financially? How can we, like, make it all come together so it's not a hierarchy, or, you know, there isn't a minority when eventually there always be. And I made a joke with someone at US Lacrosse. I'm like, you know, every interview after I was with US Lacrosse is like, so how does it feel being a Black person on lacrosse team, on US Lacrosse team? I'm like, let's pause there and let's go to a white basketball player that plays for the Olympic team. Like, how does it feel being white playing basketball because all your teammates are Black? Like, I just feel like it's like, you don't ask the question, because for basketball, like, it's already, there are all types of people that play basketball. So you don't go to, you know, here in Cincinnati, there's probably like 2 white kids. I'm like, woo, you feel it now. Like, there's 2 of you. So no one goes to them and says, how does it feel being white playing on an all Black basketball team? Like, I actually would like to ask that question, because it's like, you're the minority. How does it feel? Like, you know, it's like one of those things where you don't necessarily look at it from that perspective. But I just think it's education, but it's also like taking little bits and pieces from things that you can educate, not only just race. I think it's, to me, like, empathy is a huge piece to all of this. Like, you can't learn something and not feel it and make it connect. Like, I need to, like, feel either a part of why someone feels this way or a part of understanding this. I think feeling kind of goes with that for us to kind of make steps forward. It can't just be a knowledge thing, like, oh, Black people get treated poorly by the cops. Oh, well, it is what it is. Like, you actually have to feel it. And, you know, my nephew, who is raised in the same neighborhood I grew up in, it's very diverse, and he got pulled over by the cops 2 weeks ago. And we've had the conversation, you know, that white people don't need to have, but we have the conversation of what you don't do when a cop pulls you over, right? And he was with his white friend that's a girl. And the cop goes, what are you doing with her? And he's like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, what do you mean, what am I doing with her? And he's just like, no, what are you with her? Like, what are you doing? It's 11 o'clock at night. What are you doing with her? And he was like, and I said, this is probably not the smartest thing to say. He said some things that, you know, is jokey, like, hey, we're just probably going to go do something that we shouldn't be doing. And I'm like, you could have happened in a negative way, but obviously the cop kind of ha and let him go. But it's just like little things like that can turn completely in the opposite direction, that I think if, you know, maybe the humor got him out of it, you know, maybe the let's joke about this got him out of the situation that would have been potentially negative. But I think, like, for me, it's just, how do we, you know, communicate with our teams or communicate with our friends? And, you know, like a couple people have said already, it's not just one conversation. It's not like 50 conversations. It's understanding how you can be empathetic to a lot of the other things that are happening in everyone else's world, whether they're Spanish, Indian, like, you know, Muslim, religion, you know, when it comes to your sexuality, all of those things you have to kind of have empathy for, of what people are going through, to kind of understand how we can all kind of be better, even when you check yourself.
For sure. I think you're 100% right. I think, you know, when Yardley Love was killed, I think One Love has done an incredible job of doing exactly what you're saying, of bringing it home for people and making them empathize with people going through those types of relationships. And I think that we have such a problem doing that with race. And I think it's because people, if they're not Black or they're not a minority that they think is affected by these issues, they think that they're not involved, right? And they don't have skin in the game.
Right.
But people have to understand that they do, right? If not for anything else, if you're limiting a team, for example, to only white players, you're depriving yourself from the skills and from the, I don't know, from the success that you could have, including all different groups of people on your team, right? So if not for anything else, you're just limiting yourself to a small group of people that maybe doesn't have the wide variety of skills that you would have on your team if you open it up to a larger group. And so I think we do have to learn how to create that empathy with our players when they think that maybe they're not directly impacted by the issues.
Yeah, I think as coaches, you're going to be pretty hesitant to have a conversation with your team when you don't feel a sense of being prepared and being able to facilitate an inclusive conversation, especially as a white coach talking about these specific things that are going on in the world. And as I continue to listen and I continue to learn and educate myself, especially too being international, you know, the information I've learned about American history over the past week has blown my mind. But what I'm also learning is the conversation is not going to be perfect. You're going to mess up. I cannot understand what you women on this panel have gone through, what you've heard and what you've seen, and I never will. But being in a position and us pros on this panel as well, we have an opportunity and a platform now to have these conversations and just understand that it's not going to be perfect. But the fact that the conversation is happening and people are communicating and we're understanding where other people are coming from, you know, that shouldn't be the start, but that's what we have to do. And we can't miss this opportunity. And just one thing listening and reflecting on is, you know, I can't begin to understand what your guys' experience was growing up and playing lacrosse as a minority and as a woman of color in lacrosse, but I can remember what it was like playing the sport and being the only girl in my town and in my county that played sports. And what people said to me and what I had to feel going into an arena and being the only girl playing lacrosse or playing hockey, and I cut all my hair off so no one would know under my helmet that I was a girl, so I wouldn't have to experience that. And to think that, like, in lacrosse, that's something that people are dealing with just because of the color of their skin. And, you know, we need more women's professional players of color. We need more diversity on our national teams, because we need young women to be able to look at the highest level of our sport and say, she looks like me. I can do this. And the fact that we don't have that yet is something that I'm very passionate about, because, you know, that's what we need in order to grow our sport and to also change society as well.
Yeah, same like what Gina said, how she had the ability to pick the school that she coaches at. The 3 years that I was assisting, it was white. I was the black coach, and that was it. There was maybe one. She was black, but she was very light skinned. Like, you couldn't tell the difference between her and me. And I would have, had I stayed at that school, I would have gone all 4 years with a group of my girls. I would have had them their senior year, but I had to make the decision that a crosstown rival of mine, which is their feeder, that high school's feeder, we have like 27 middle schools. There's so many schools here, but the feeder schools that go to the school that I now coach at, they're all the minority schools. So they're coming in, no one knows anything about lacrosse. So I felt like I, as a Black woman, had to make that change. So these girls are seeing that there's, you know, and I kind of feel like that's why I was hired there too, is because he needed some representation on the lacrosse field. So, you know, my goal, I've only been coaching for 5 years or 4 years now. I'm 25, so I'm just at the beginning of my, you know, my coaching years. And I just, even that we're having this conversation now, these girls are 15 to 18, right? So they've experienced their own form of racism or whatever, but we have to find where we're going to move forward.
Right.
Because there can be a kindergartner, you know, there can be a kindergartner right now that his parents might have taught him to be racist. Now it's 2020, so now we have to go 18 more years of him not learning. So it, like you said, it starts at home, but also choosing where I've chosen and my path is to just make it more inclusive, because as a Black coach, like Gina was saying, I connect with everybody. That's just like, I'm a people person. My girls love me, you know, I'm like a hype man. So it's easier as a Black woman to connect, I think, with white athletes than it is for a white coach to connect with those Black players that you have coming in. Just, you know, you just being being relative to them and relating to them in some way. It's easier for white coaches, you know, to relate with white athletes. But the vice versa, that I don't think is easy.
Yeah, and I think to Dobbie, to your point, I think it's important to also know that even a Black woman playing, it's an uncomfortable conversation for us as well. Mm-hmm. Like, I am like, that's a lot of the times where a lot of people are like, do you want to talk? Do you want to talk? I'm like, no, like, 'cause it's uncomfortable it's uncomfortable at times for me too, because it's, you know, vulnerability, it's honesty, it's trust. It's like, what is it that I can say that you may or may not understand? What is it that we can actually talk about? What is, like I said before, what is real and what is not? I think of understanding that point too. I think I communicate that with my team more than anything. Like, whatever we're talking about, know that sometimes I may be uncomfortable too. It's not, you know, just a very easy conversation for us to have about race. Like, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about all the things that we've gone through. And it's not easy. You know, I talk about that with my team a lot. A lot of things are not easy for me, or sometimes I don't even want to talk about it. But just in a sense of understanding that, of, you know, having the confidence for, you know, being white and coaching the sport, it's, you know, not relative to anything. Everyone's uncomfortable. I think in conversations as these, it's the, you know, how vulnerable are we willing to be? Obviously, you're more willing to be vulnerable with some more than others. But I think it's important to kind of figure that out amongst yourselves. But I think it's important to know that, you know, it's not every, like she was saying before, like everyone's different, but some people are way more comfortable of talking about race than others. And that's important to recognize and realize too, that I'm with you. It's not that it's comfortable for me to talk about it. It's just something that, you know, it's picking and choosing of when to kind of pull that card, and know that, you know, for us, it's not all something that we want to be in front of cameras and talk about either. So.
No, I think that it's a good time to raise this question for people watching too, for coaches out there who haven't had conversations with their team. Now's a perfect time to do that. Is that something, you know, that we should be encouraging coaches around the country, no matter the age that you're coaching, start having these conversations with your team about your locker room? And as well for white teammates out there, you know, what should people be reaching out and saying? I know it's different for everyone and everyone has different experiences, but we talk about being allies, and, you know, what exactly can the lacrosse community do now to be strong allies to their teammates and to be better teammates in that locker room?
Well, I think it's, you know, having empathy and being real. Like, what is it that you really feel? Like, I know Kayla said, like, it's a question that they asked to their team, like, how did it make you feel? And there's no right or wrong answer to this general situation or question, but be real about how you feel, and let's talk about it. I think that's a good way to start the conversation, and know, like, that, you know, what do you need to say? It's like, I think how you can be an ally is, I've kind of been telling my friends and my kind of circle, it's you just like you would stand up for anything else, stand up for what you believe, point blank, period. I don't need you to tweet a million times. I don't need you to Facebook post everything and your whole feed be about racial tension in America. And, you know, even to, like, one of my players was like, well, I'm going to go protest to show I support you. And I'm like, well, thank you. Like, that's great. But for me, I want you to live in what you stand for, period. And that's kind of how you live your life. And it, like, I don't want it to be kind of watered down by this situation. I want it to be every day that you live, just like you stand for your values with religion and how you were brought up and your character. I feel like that is how I would want you to be in any situation behind closed doors. It's the character of who you are. and what you're going to stand for. That's how you can start to change it for the long haul, not just right now, not in this particular setting. That's my perspective.
Treat others the way you want to be treated, right? At the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
I think it goes back to what Gina was saying earlier too, is it's not just about the police and like police brutality. It's maybe a teacher, you know, like if you have a friend that's a teacher and you make sure that you need to tell them that they need to educate themselves, or a social worker, you know, like a lot of things right now are to defund police everywhere and then bring social workers in. But then do you bring a social worker in that also has not educated themselves? You know, like we go to college and we're taught what we're taught, and then we go on to use our experiences to teach. But if someone's just going by the book, you know, they really tried to put themselves in the shoes of someone that they are trying to help? And I think that's like the most important, is always trying to put your shoes in that position of power to help those people. So if it's not police and it's a social worker, okay, so the social worker comes in to de-escalate a situation and it's a person of color. Do they know how to handle that situation correctly based on, you know, how that person is and what their environment is?
Well, you know what, ladies, we could go on for 2 more hours if we had time. And what I will say is, among other things, I kind of thought that this morning that if we had time, I would love to just keep going and just break it up into 2 segments. But we'll just have all of you back. Give you a week or so, 2 weeks to just go out into the community, as you're saying, and learn more. Mm-hmm. And I'll let each one of you say something. But I will say, education-wise, I'm trying to, and I'm not really good at this, but on our website, emwf.org/overtime, we are listing resources that I'm learning firsthand. You know, I think it was Gina mentioned the movie When They See Us. A good friend of mine that I was a roommate with at Syracuse University, Dr. Fred Opie, between him and his wife, they are posting a ton of information. And I think I sent you all one of his spots, but it's Fred Opie, OPIE.com. And I would say that for white, black, red, green, doesn't matter. They just really a ton of information they're putting out. And what his wife, and who's probably as smart or equally as smart as him, said is just educate yourself, like you're saying. So I'll start with sign-offs now. I'm going to let Daniela go first because I know she has another call. So if you want to say a quick word and then you have to go, I understand.
I just really appreciate having the opportunity to be on this panel. Just one quick thing, like I am Hispanic. My mom is from Mexico, and I honestly have never been a victim of prejudice or discrimination just because I don't look Mexican and because of the color of my skin. And so I understand that I will never know what it's like to be discriminated against because of the color of my skin, but I do empathize with people of color, and I was brought up in a household of people of color. So that's just my last piece. But thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, Sydney, you want to go next?
Yeah, I feel the same. I just feel really grateful to be invited and to be able to listen and learn from all of you and like take this into my coaching and like really like ruminate and like make sure I apply these things, and hopefully we can talk again and like learn even more. And yeah, I just am grateful that even to be virtually surrounded by this awesome group of people in the lacrosse community.
Gina, I know you have to go too, so I'm sorry. I'm getting mixed up.
That's okay. No worries. No, I think I'm fortunate to be in the position that I am in and have the experience that I have had because of lacrosse, and made the friends and had, you know, the U.S. team as an experience. And I'm extremely grateful to the sport and the people who have mentored me from, you know, 8th grade up until now. So very like humbled to be a part of this group, and thank you, those of you who are of color, for, you know, volunteering your time, and those of you who aren't and are white and are being vulnerable in another capacity, recognizing this is not an easy conversation for anyone. And really happy that you guys were chosen or elected to be involved in a really intimate conversation that's really, really hard, and put yourselves out there. So thank you for being our allies. And I look forward to being on the call with you guys next time.
All right, beautiful. Diana.
So first, just want to say thank you, Matt, to reaching out to me, allowing me to be a part of this. Very passionate about lacrosse. So from playing in high school and not really having that many people that look like me playing and to look up to now having a platform that I can kind of speak up on, share my experience, and help just bring the lack of diversity, lack of accessibility to the forefront, it means a lot. So just continue, if I had a message for anyone watching who is maybe not white, continue to educate yourselves, continue to speak in your circles, as well as in the lacrosse community. Try to grow the game, encourage people who you may know, who is not the traditional lacrosse player, to just try it. And then from there we can kind of build and see what else can we do to bring lacrosse to areas, neighborhoods where maybe it might be low to middle income, where lacrosse isn't even really a thing for people to know about. So just continue to educate yourselves and learn about the background of racism in general. It goes way farther than police brutality. Education, housing, things like that. Like, I could go on and on. So just make sure to educate yourselves, try to be an advocate, and then obviously an ally. I know Gina, myself, Davia, if you guys ever need resources, I'll extend that to you guys. Feel free to reach out, and I'm more than happy to kind of grow and spread that information with you guys.
All right. Sydney.
Where you went?
Oh, you already went. That's right. Sorry, Jesscia. I'm not paying. I need to pay more.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate you putting this together. And honestly, I'm just enjoying listening and learning and having these conversations with you guys, also with my players, parents, just opening up the door, pulling off the cover and being really raw. And I think that that's the first start. And then just education as well, and how we can improve and make it better in the long run. And I've obviously been coaching for a long time, and I feel like there are things that are way more important than just the sport itself, to be coaching. And I think that that's something that I'm really taking away from today.
Beautiful. Davia.
Yeah, I'm also grateful. I think it's pretty cool. First of all, to see Gina. I'm not commenting on your age, but like to see a older Black woman than myself, because I haven't seen that. So it was really eye-opening. And even just to be a part of a group of women that are some that have been coaching for a long time. Like I said, I'm pretty new to coaching, but I've been involved with lacrosse since I picked up a stick. And having a mentor that is white, and in the lacrosse world and all those things that I get to talk to, is really nice, but he's a male. So it's nice to see, women, and powerful women at that, just opening themselves up to having a good conversation. Because, locally it might be hard because, talking to your friends about something that you've been friends with someone for so long, and you might have disagreements there, and, you don't really want to have those disagreements. But I think this panel, that we're spread out across the country is like the most beautiful thing, that we're all coming from different places, and it's not just central to our one location. I think it's nice to see what other people are experiencing across the world. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to get back and talk some more.
Yeah, no problem. And I know I speak for everybody, that two of our panelists had to sign off because they have other calls, but I know all of the coaches have said they're there for you, and you guys have contact information,
For sure.
numbers. So don't be afraid to reach out to the more experienced coaches. Dana, go ahead, and then I'll come to you, Kayla.
Yeah, I just want to, again, thank you, Matt, for getting this incredible group together and having this extremely important conversation and putting on a platform where a lot of people are going to hear it and going to see it, and that's so important. And I just want to talk to any of the girls out there of color or minority who are thinking that, lacrosse isn't a place for me. I promise you it is a place for you. We need you. And as a pro league and as an international sport, we want to see you play at that next level. So, just stay at it. And although there's a lot of barriers and obstacles, like, lead the way and let's change the look of lacrosse. And I really sincerely believe that we can do that.
That's beautiful. And I'll say that, I'm still getting educated with the WPLL, but I will say, as the GM of the Uganda group, and we were experimenting with, we were trying to bring a women's team over the US just to tour. The WPL has opened their doors and said, yeah, you could come down to our, it was going to be a weekend training scrimmages or something like that. And the gal said, yeah, you could bring the team down. And I said, could they practice with them? Oh, we could do like a little clinic and things like that. So I appreciate the WPLL for what you're doing, what you're saying there, Dana, and the message. And if I can help in any way, small or large, out from San Diego, you guys let me know. And Kayla, you're going to sign us off. So no pressure, but it better be a good sign off.
Yeah, I would just echo what everyone else said, and just a big thanks to you, Matt, for setting this up and opening the dialogue between a lot of people. And, I look forward to furthering that dialogue. I think, there's so much more that needs to be talked about and said. But I would also say, like, a lot of people have been asking, well, what can we do? And I think the other thing too, specifically for white people, is not just going out there and doing something to save the day and check off the box, but really critically think about yourself and reflect on your experiences and maybe how you've benefited from them, or maybe your silence, or all these different things. I think to just educate yourself and critically reflect on your experiences. But again, thank you so much, Matt, and I look forward to furthering the dialogue and keep talking about all this.
Well, again, ladies, thank you for your time. I'm just going to sign off and say, next week, to a lot of your points, I'm trying to gather organizational leaders, Nations United, Detroit United, which is an intercity program, Harlem Lacrosse, Adrenaline Lacrosse. So just to have a mix, I think would be interesting to hear from people that run events, or these organizations that are doing intercity work trying to get to those events. And I know a lot of you touched on the economics of the game and stuff like that. So that should be interesting. Obviously, we'll have you all back. We've got other panels of ladies and men. And I want to do mixed panels, and I want to actually do a mixed panel of folks that are married interracially. I think that's something, having been married to a white woman for years and having her come to lacrosse events, and I'm not a marcher. This is my way of not protesting, but voicing my concern. She has been kept in touch with me the last 2 weeks, and she's very active and always been active as more of an outwardly marching type. So it's kind of cool to compare notes and get a feeling for how she's feeling too. So I just invite everyone to keep tuning in. We'll do this as long as necessary. The subject matter is kind of endless, unfortunately, but I do say that if somebody said, how long are you going to do it? I said, well, hopefully it won't be needed that long, but at least it can be a resource. And again, thank you, ladies, for your time. So for everyone here, thanks for tuning in to this episode 2 of Overtime, and we'll be back next Wednesday night, same time, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Until then, thanks, and be well, everyone.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Pose a question to the panel by emailing us at ot@emwf.org. We'd love to hear from you.